Hi, I'm Kat, and today I have for you, a word in Romanian of course, a true crime case, and I will also be doing my makeup at the same time. So, the word for today is dispariție. 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 Well done guys, you just said disappearance. This video was actually suggested by Melissa. So Melissa, I just want to thank you for the suggestion. As the sun set on southwestern Michigan in 1993, the eerie silence was shattered by the news of a missing 15-year-old girl, pregnant and vulnerable. Her sudden disappearance sent ripples of fear and concern throughout the community. The police launched a tireless investigation using every tool at their disposal, including turning to the paranormal for help. But as days turned into weeks, the mystery of her whereabouts only deepened, leaving everyone searching for answers in the dark. Rebecca Lynn Stowe, known to her friends and family as Becky, was born on 3rd of November 1977 in the small town of Niles, US, just north of the Indiana border. She was a vibrant girl, really adventurous, and her family would say that, she was a bit on the wild side. But I guess that all of us need a bit of that in our life. Becky lived with her mother, Diana, Diana's longtime boyfriend Steve, and her sister Cynthia at 2526 South 3rd Street. Becky's parents had separated and she never met her father, but by all means, Becky actually had a perfectly normal childhood. She and her family enjoyed spending their summers at Lake Michigan, where they would make campfires and cookouts. And this was just, perfect for Becky because she was like a tomboy. She was really fun, energetic, and easygoing. Diana's boyfriend, or Diane's boyfriend, Steve, really tried to be a fatherly figure to Becky, but she saw him as really bossy and didn't like that, so they would be bickering a lot of the time. Becky would argue with adults frequently, as many teenagers do. But with Steve, it felt like Becky just had enough of him and their arguments as well. I think that, you can imagine how teenagers are like. They don't like you telling them what to do, what not to do, and they will lash out, and quite honestly, is the age really. But Becky had a great relationship with her sister Cynthia, often recording videos and chatting about their future, what Becky would want to become, knowing that she will be somebody later on in life.
This is my room. This is my bed we're sitting in. Oh my god. This is the happy face. Wow. Little hairs. How do I get this off? I wish you don't. This is my room.
And she was really determined to succeed. She had been a sophomore year student at Niles Brandywine High School, and in the summer of 1993 it seemed that Becky was really blossoming and maturing, becoming a young woman. That summer Becky was actually super excited and happy to have a boyfriend. Rob was her big crush. They were dating and she told her sister everything about them and about Rob. Robert Lehman, her classmate, or Rob for short, was the all-American teen, popular in high school for his handsome look and his plays on the football field. On the other hand, Becky was the school's troublemaker, but they connected. Becky seemed really happy. However, there were a lot of comments about their relationship, that Rob was dating someone beneath him, and also Rob would say that Becky took their relationship kind of like more serious than it actually was, because it turned out that Rob was already in a serious relationship with another girl, but in that summer she was away to New York. And sure, Rob thought that it was a great idea to have a side girl, right? I mean, it's just disgusting. I mean, I get that teenagers are teenagers and they will be doing all these kind of things, but it's still disgusting. I mean, if you don't learn as a teenager that when you are in a serious relationship you need to take that relationship seriously, then How are you going to be in your relationships as an adult? I mean, this is just my belief, really. On July the 9th, 1993, Becky said she'd had enough of Steve, her stepdad. So Diane, her mom, agreed to let Becky sleep over at her friend Jacqueline's house. The following day, Becky left a note for Jacqueline and her boyfriend, Todd Kaiser, saying that she went to visit Rob, her boyfriend. But Jacqueline and Todd became really concerned when Rob called them about an hour later, asking them where Becky was. Rob told Todd that he hadn't seen Becky at all that day. Becky had left her wallet, money and cigarettes behind. She was a 1-pack-a-day smoker, so this would have been very unusual. When Diane found out and she couldn't get hold of Becky either, she had to call the police. After 8 hours of trying to find Becky, Diane finally reported her as missing. Authorities questioned Becky's friends, her family, but they had absolutely no leads. However, Jacqueline made a shocking confession. Becky was actually pregnant and it was Rob's baby. He claimed he knew about the pregnancy and he tried to convince Becky to have an abortion. But on the day that Becky vanished, he denied even seeing her. He said that on that day he was busy doing some landscape work, spending time with his family, and later going to the restaurant where he worked as a busboy. As the investigation moved on, police started wondering if Becky, perhaps, pregnant and frightened, maybe disappeared of her own will. But those closest to her didn't think so, especially because Becky left all of her belongings behind. When detectives learned that Becky and her mother's boyfriend Steve had a tense relationship, they started looking closer at the home. On that day when Becky went missing, Steve had taken the day off work and he maintained that he was at the house alone when Becky vanished. The small town of Niles was busy with local searches for Becky, and Diane, her mom, posted missing persons flyers on telephone poles and even on storefront windows. But months went by and there was still absolutely no sign of Becky. Although surveillance on Steve produced nothing suspicious that could link him to Becky's disappearance, detectives actually asked him to take a polygraph test. But not only did Steve refuse to take the polygraph test, he packed his things and he moved away without even saying a word. This made him look even more suspicious. They tried to find Steve, but they were unsuccessful. And as the months went by, dozens of searches were executed in hopes of finding Becky. Diane, without her daughter and her boyfriend at the same time, became desperate to find out where Becky was. She turned to psychics for answers, but they all told her the same thing, that Becky was dead and they would never find her alive. Cass County prosecutor Scott Teeter said, quote, "In the over 25 years I've been a prosecutor, I've never had any law enforcement agency consult with a psychic. In this case, because this had gone on for over a year and a half and we were coming up empty, the decision was made to consult with a psychic that had assisted law enforcement in another case." End of quote. The psychic said something about an industrial area with water nearby and rail tracks. The prosecutor said that the lead was interesting, but sadly it wasn't specific enough for them to pin down the location and it didn't really break the case. Diane, Becky's mother, made it her life's purpose to do everything she could to find her daughter. She would be calling the police every day asking what are they doing to find Becky. Her and the family would go around town and putting missing persons posters everywhere, on restaurant windows, grocery stores, even on people's cars. I mean, they searched for Becky everywhere. They knew that she wouldn't disappear of her own will, and they at one point believed that she was kidnapped. In 1995, 2 years after Becky's mysterious disappearance, the leads dried up and the case sadly went cold. Until officials with the Cass County Sheriff's Office got a shocking phone call from a woman who claimed she knew exactly what happened to Becky Stowe. She came forward saying that Becky had been murdered. Through the tip, the police were also informed of the location where Becky was supposed to be buried. The woman was called Angela Snyder, Rob Lemon's high school sweetheart. Remember that Rob had been in a serious relationship whilst going out with Becky at the same time. Angela said that Rob admitted to killing Becky and he buried her on his uncle's farms, and Becky's remains could be found near a tree line by a lake, a grave concealed by a large wood pile. On October 15th or October the 5th, 1995, the date is not very clear, the information gathered led authorities to a farm between Niles and Cassopolis. The police found Becky Stowe's remains buried on the farm. They went to the scene and they removed the wood pile as described by Angela. Using a backhoe, they dug inch by inch before the machine pulled red-colored clothing and skeletal remains from a hole in the ground. According to the prosecutor, it was easy to identify that they had found a pelvic bone and a thigh, and dental records confirmed it was the body of Becky. A medical examination determined that the murderer broke her neck, which killed her, but decomposition made it impossible for a medical examiner to find any physical evidence that she was pregnant at the time of her death. There were photos and videos taken depicting the crime scene and the excavation process. They also showed the secluded location of the body and the size of the grave, and an anthropologist that excavated the body. These would later be used at the trial. When the police were investigating Becky's disappearance, they were suspicious of Robert or Rob, and they even subjected him to a lie detector tests, which he passed. And he also had an alibi, so they really had no reason to think that he was not telling the truth. But Angela told police that Robert confessed to her right after she returned from her trip in 1993. So that would have been the same summer after she came back from New York. Robert had started behaving in a really weird way, which made Angela worry about her life, and that's when she decided to approach the police. After 2 years, mind you. I don't know why she didn't do it right after he confessed. Maybe she didn't believe him. Maybe she was too young and didn't fully understand the gravity of the situation. Regardless, I feel like, personal opinion here, I feel like she should have, especially because everybody knew that Becky was missing. In fact, everybody in Niles was looking for her. After Angela came forward, authorities questioned Robert and revealed Angela's statement to him. He then voluntarily provided his account of what happened. According to him, he took Becky to his uncle's house to spend some time together, but they began to wrestle, and when doing so, Rob maneuvered Becky's arms around her head before he heard something pop. According to Rob, it was all an accident. Investigators, though, they believed it was premeditated murder after they found out that Rob and his cousin, who had learning disabilities, dug the hole Becky was placed in the previous day. Then, on the day of the murder, Robert asked Becky out on a picnic. They drove over to the farm, found a small clearing, and settled down there. Robert said that he was behind Becky as they sat hugging and kissing. Of course, to make her feel comfortable, right? So she trusts him. Then, in one swift motion, he grabbed her neck in a hold from behind and broke it. Becky's body was then buried in the dug-up grave. Rob had another person clock in at his job, and he chose to strangle Becky rather than use a knife. Probably was to avoid blood. Authorities arrested Robert Lehman for open murder, which meant that a jury would decide if it was a case of first or second degree murder. Although he was only 16 years old when the murder happened, Rob was tried as an adult. You remember Todd, Jacqueline's boyfriend? Todd, who was Becky's friend as well. Remember the night she spent at their house? He was relieved to find out that Rob had been arrested because they finally found out what happened after spending years looking for Becky and having hope. More information about how Becky died came to light during the 1997 trial when prosecutors presented their version of events. The prosecutor said, quote, "I think he took her out there, showed her the hole in the ground and said, 'Do you understand how serious I am about you getting an abortion?' And then she started to fight. She was strangled to the point that she lost consciousness and then put in the hole. She might not have died instantly from being strangled. Becky Stowe was buried alive. Becky Stowe died because she had a crush on a kid and she fell in love with him. She slept with him, she got pregnant. And this kid, out of all the people she could have picked, was a homicidal sociopath, and when faced with the choice of being embarrassed that he slept with her or killing her, he chose killing her. End of quote. When last seen together, Becky and Rob had a heated argument because of Becky's pregnancy and her not wanting to have an abortion. As Rob drove away from her house, he yelled, "You ruined my life." Shortly after, Rob got 2 shovels and went with his cousin to his cousin's farm. He dug a hole in a secluded spot on the farm and then said, "Oh, that bitch will fit in there." He then left the area, leaving 1 shovel behind near the hole that he dug up. The next day, Rob got in touch with Becky, picked her up and drove her to the same spot where he dug up the hole. He then killed her and buried her there. Afterwards, he got rid of the shovel in a dumpster and called Becky's family and friends, claiming that he was looking for her. Later that same afternoon, Rob went back to his cousin's farm and told his cousin that the hole was filled and showed him where Becky bit his arm. At trial, Rob's defense was that he was incapable of forming intent to commit first-degree murder because of PTSD stemming from his abuse as a child at the Small World Daycare Center. It was rumored but never confirmed that Becky got pregnant just before her murder, and when she consulted with Robert, he asked her to have an abortion and she agreed. Later though, she changed her mind and told Robert that she wanted to keep the child. Shortly after telling him that she wanted to keep the baby, Becky just vanished. At the time of her murder, Becky was 15 years old and Rob was 16 years old. At trial, the jury didn't agree that the murder was an accident and instead convicted him of premeditated first-degree murder. He was sent to prison for life without the possibility of parole. Yes, Robert was sentenced to life in prison, but this wouldn't be over by far. In 1998, there was an appeal for various reasons. One arguing that in the initial trial there wasn't enough evidence that Becky's murder was premeditated, which was rejected. And rightly so, because I think even not seeing everything and not knowing all the evidence in the trial, it's quite clear that it was premeditated. Rob also claimed that he received ineffective assistance of counsel because counsel failed to prepare a defense. He also claimed that the post-traumatic stress defense was poorly presented and was flawed because he asserted that the killing was an accident and he had no memory of any abuse at the Small World Daycare Center. This was rejected as well. Certain evidence was not allowed in the initial trial, and this was another ground for his appeal in 1998. He was trying to bring in evidence, including daycare center documents that had been prepared by the state police, the Department of Social Services, the FBI, and other agencies, compiled by Police Sergeant Podjan, which were rejected. By the way, before we move on, you know guys that whenever I have these names, pronunciations, I am trying my best to look them up on Google, the pronunciations, and I even write them down in brackets on the script just so I know how to pronounce them. But there are some names which I can't get a hold of the right pronunciation, even though I keep trying and rehearsing the pronunciations of the names, so it kind of doesn't register in my brain. So apologies for all of the times that I'm pronouncing names wrong. So Rob's team also tried to admit late received copies of counseling notes from one of the alleged child victims at the daycare center, which was again rejected. I'm thinking it could have been rejected possibly because they weren't his notes and, you know, confidentiality and all of these things, but I can't be sure because I couldn't find out exactly why all these were rejected. There was also a newspaper ad in which parents of children who attended the Small World Daycare Center, including Rob's parents, expressed their belief that their children had not been victimized or abused at the center. Although the trial court initially admitted this evidence, it later reversed itself and withdrew the document. The appeal court found that Rob was not prejudiced by the admission of the document, particularly where his mother had testified earlier without objection that she and her husband initially supported the Barkmans who ran the Small World Daycare Center, and believed that Richard Bachman was one of the greatest guys there was. Okay, so I guess that we need to talk about this daycare center so it doesn't really get confusing. In 1985, in a Berrien County, Michigan courthouse, Richard Bachman was on trial on 22 counts of child sexual abuse. He was accused of molesting 70 children. Richard, along with his wife, owned It's a Small World daycare center in Niles, Michigan. The Bachmans were investigated as a result of the work of two therapists from Riverwood Mental Health Center who were going off of recovered childhood sex abuse memories. Rebecca Bachman is the former director of It's a Child, Small World and co-director of Victims of Child Abuse Laws. She blames questionable interview techniques for leading to improper charges of child abuse. According to a news article from 1993 in the Herald Palladium, Richard was accused of molesting a young girl 10 years prior whilst working at the center along with the other 70 children. Richard had already been convicted in 1984 for raping and fondling a 4-year-old boy, and he served 5 years in prison before his conviction got overturned by the Michigan Court of Appeals due to a legal issue over the boy's testimony. In 1990, he was sentenced to 2 years probation after pleading guilty to a reduced charge of assault with intent to commit first-degree criminal sexual conduct. Obviously, that Richard maintained he was innocent, and he said that he was a victim of unfounded fear and police investigators who are only interested in boosting their own careers. It seems that Robert, from our case, was one of the kids that was molested whilst attending the daycare. He claims that he suffered PTSD from the abuse he went through, but he never told his parents what was happening, even when his mom would ask him questions later on. Rob says that he remembers playing a burial game whilst at the center, but he didn't really go into details about what actually happened. Obviously that, this center, the daycare center, was closed, and a lot of parents didn't want to believe that their kids had been abused there. But anyway, moving on. In his trial for the murder of Becky, Rob's defense were trying to argue that because of his PTSD, he committed the murder. So that's why he killed Becky, because he had PTSD from the abuse he went through. Yeah, you hear this kind of crazy defenses. I mean, we should, I think, all get used to it by now. During the trial, the prosecution presented an expert witness, Dr. Clark, who was an expert in the subject of sexual abuse of children and had focused his work on the validity of techniques to investigate such allegations. In the appeal, Rob's team argued that Dr. Clark's opinion went beyond his experience, but this was rejected as well. In 2019, at 42 years old, Rob was up for resentencing. After 2 days of hearings, it was determined he would serve a shorter sentence. The hearings stem from the 2012 U.S. Supreme Court ruling in Miller v. Alabama, which reversed a law allowing juveniles to be sentenced to life in prison for murder. A 2016 Supreme Court ruling in Montgomery v. Louisiana added retroactivity to the ruling. That allowed about 200 inmates serving juvenile life sentences to be considered by local courts for resentencing. Each local court was required to make a recommendation as to whether a criminal should be considered for resentencing or not. Rob was chosen in 2016. Prosecuting attorney Victor Fitz and defense attorneys Sophia Nelson and Tina Olson made their cases as to why Rob Lehman should not be and should be given a more lenient sentence. The defense made the case that Rob learned from what he called his heinous actions and became a better person. When his lawyer called him as a witness, she spent time having him describe his crimes, abuses, and poor decisions and whether he regretted them. He said, quote, "I feel absolute disgust. I feel ashamed and regret nothing more than taking Becky's life. I'm ashamed that I didn't handle my fears about a teenage pregnancy in a healthy manner." End of quote. He also expressed regret towards Becky's family, but he didn't actually apologize to them. Quote, "To the Stowe family, I apologize," he said. "I'm sorry that you've had to come here today and relive these painful memories that I've created in your life. I know that there's nothing I could ever say or do that would ease the pain, the suffering, the heartache, the emotional trauma, and the grief that I put your family through and that you live and experience every day." End of quote. Which, you know, I guess that he's just trying this sob story so they feel sorry for him and they realize that he had changed. But you know how the saying goes, a leopard never changes its spots. His attorney then focused on his time in prison, where she claimed that he made great strides to become a better person and share what he learned to help others. He took a prisoner student college class on social justice. He was a member of a program that helped greyhound dogs get used to home life instead of racing. He took mediation training, which he later used to help dismantle tensions and violence in prison. He works to monitor and talk down those on suicide watch lists. He also facilitates discussions ranging from mental health help to conflict resolution with the other prisoners. The programs, he said, taught him to be a real man, which had the following traits: love, kindness, honesty, communication, and the ability to seek help when needed. I mean, you know what? This all sounds rainbows and unicorns, but I think we all know that your defense is going to prepare you before an appeal, and they probably had a strategy throughout the years and told him to do all these things so he gets a better chance to get out. Most of them do it, you know. It doesn't mean that they mean it or they enjoy it. In the end, nothing, no training, no course, no charity, no job will ever change the fact that you are a murderer. But prosecution argued that Rob was still self-centered and he was deceptive. When he was called as a witness by the defense team, he admitted his self-centeredness in killing Becky to make his life easier than keeping her death a secret, leading her family on a 27-month hunt to find her. He also admitted lying to officials during investigations and trials by saying that the murder was accidental. He said that he did this out of fear of being punished. Prosecutor Fitz also questioned why Rob waited until that Wednesday to apologize through tears to Becky's family. He argued that Rob had never formally apologized to the family because it would ruin the appeals he made while in prison. Actions from Rob's past were also brought up during the cross-examination, including the then teenager killing frogs, a dog, and gophers on his extended family's property. He also talked about his relationship with Angela Crocker, whom he had a relationship with after murdering Becky until a short time after heading to prison. Angela said that Rob abused her by slapping her and putting her into a headlock, which she later compared to the way he had possibly killed Becky. Rob said he felt ashamed about that and he felt sad and hurt by what Angela had said. Rob used his 3 witnesses to emphasize the fear that many still feel toward him: Angela Crocker, his ex-girlfriend, Becky's friend Jacqueline Kaiser, and Becky's sister Cynthia Slates. They all said they would fear Rob would come after them if he was released. The prosecutor said that Rob's wanting to be placed on parole was self-centered because it instilled fear in others that he has apologized to. When the United States Supreme Court reopened Robert's case, it has ruled that juveniles sentenced to life in prison will be considered for resentencing, and life sentences for juveniles were considered unconstitutional. In 2020, 23 years and a day after he was convicted in a Cass County courtroom of a crime that put him behind bars for life, Robert Eugene Lehman III, 43 years old, was resentenced by Cass County Circuit Court Judge Mark Herman to between 25 and 60 years. He is among more than 360 so-called juvenile lifers in the state of Michigan receiving individualized resentencing consideration after the U.S. Supreme Court ruled mandatory life without parole sentences for juveniles unconstitutional, citing research that shows juvenile brains are not fully developed for adult decision making. He is one of 14 such offenders from cases originating in Berrien and Cass counties. Prosecutor Fitz said he was disappointed the judge gave a 25-year minimum, which could create an early parole opportunity. Rob Lehman has said he plans to live with his mother and stepfather in Granger if he is paroled. Cindy Slate's Becky's sister and closest living relative said, quote, "When I was 16, I knew the difference between right and wrong, and I knew it was wrong to kill a human being. It does not matter if a person has changed or not, that person is forever responsible for his heinous crime. Please don't dismiss my sister's life," she asked the judge. Cindy, who along with Rob's ex-girlfriend testified in recent hearings, objected to his resentencing because of the crime's heinous nature, saying they are worried about running into him. Cindy said that his GPS coordinates show he will be living only 18 minutes from her Niles home. His ex-girlfriend lives even closer in South Bend. Parole conditions include that he must stay away from them during the 2 years that he's on parole, and that if he accidentally encounters them, he must be the one to leave the area. But even the possibility of coming face to face with him angers Cindy, and I would say rightly so, when he originally was given the option of being paroled to housing in Battle Creek, Michigan. Quote, "We lived in peace before he was resentenced. We lived like it was over, and we went on with our lives knowing he would never be an issue again," she said. "Now we are living in turmoil with this." Their mother, Diana Ferris, died of cancer in 2015 and was cremated and buried over Becky's grave in Silverbrook Cemetery in Niles. "I've missed out on so much of her life," Cindy says of Becky. "I loved Becky as if she was my own." Cindy was nearly 11 years old when Becky was born, and the elder sister helped their single-parent mother raise her. She regrets not ever getting to know any of Becky's children, including her unborn baby. Becky would be 46 years old now. Becky was found more than 2 years after she went missing. She was buried in a shallow grave under a woodpile on Rob's uncle's rural property, where Rob would have parties before and even after Becky's death. Cindy, Becky's sister, wants to believe that people can change and that Rob has changed, but she worries this is just one more way he tricked the system yet again. Cindy wonders whether moving back to this area is just another example of Rob's manipulating the system. Prosecutor Fitz said of Rob, "This was not a 13 or 14-year-old kid who was the getaway driver in a spur-of-the-moment crime. This is the type of case where the mandatory life sentence should have been affirmed." Rob's mother, Kathy Opick, testified in a resentencing hearing that she wanted a second chance for her son. She visited him every 2 weeks during the decades he spent in prison. She wants a second chance for her son, yet her son was the one who didn't give Becky and the unborn baby a chance. Cindy said that Becky was very fond of Rob. She remembers Becky telling her she's got a new boyfriend, his name is Rob, he's really nice. She had left a note stating, "Went to go talk with Rob," and we never saw her again. He covered his alibi very well. He had someone clock him in and out at work the day he killed my sister. He even had a hole dug the day before. In January 2021, Robert Lehman was granted parole and released from prison with a set of parole guidelines. According to latest reports, Robert is now living with his mother and stepfather in Granger. Becky's family are hoping that the name Becky Stowe is on people's minds and not the man who stole her from them 2 decades ago. Becky's dream was to drive a green Jeep on the beaches of California. She just wanted to do that, and unfortunately she never even got her driver's license because her life ended at 15 years old. Cindy invites anyone who would like to share in remembering Becky to be a part of her memorial Facebook page, which I'm going to share the link for in the description under the video. With this, I'm going to end today's video. I really want to know, what do you guys think about this case? Do you think that he should have spent his life in prison? I do think that he should have spent the life in prison, and I also agree with the prosecutor in saying that the gravity of the crime should be taken into consideration when you are deciding to resentence someone. And also, it sounds really bad in saying this, but if you are interested in any of the makeup that I used for today's look, all of the products are linked in the description under the video. I also do take case suggestions, so if you have any case in particular you want me to cover, just leave any details you have in the comments under the video. And yes, before I go, don't forget I'm going to leave the link for the Facebook memorial page of Becky's in the description under this video, so if you are interested in joining the Facebook page, you know, just look out for the link in the description under this video. Thank you so much, stay safe, take care, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!